Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Ineye EGUA da, Medinde Odwira Kwesi, Radna Mpata Akan. Apamumai Amaruka Tifimu Odwira. That means greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is EGUA Day, Marketplace Day. My name is Odwira Kwesi, Radna Mpata Akan. Odwira of the Afuraitkamu Nation in North America. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the show once again. We are opening up the chat room right now, and we're going to place some links in the chat room to documents that we're going to go over tonight. For individuals who are on the phone line, if you have a question or a comment, just hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you are in the chat room and you have a question or a comment, you must log in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a login or a username, you can create one quickly in Blog Talk so you can interact in the chat room. And we're just trying to pull up the chat room right now. Just give us a second. It looks like it's taking a minute to pull up. And we might have to reboot it. In the meantime, for individuals who are new to the programs, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. On Joda, on Monday nights, we have Akanso Nanason, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion. So we deal specifically with the Akan expression of Nanason, the Akan expression of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestors, foremost because we are Akan, secondly because of the misinformation that has been propagated in the Western Hemisphere, as well as by individuals on the continent of Afuraikai, in Ghana, in other places, misrepresenting Akan culture, Akan cosmology, Akan philosophy, the nature of the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and the Great Father, the nature of the Creator and Creatress, who is actually the grandchildren, are the grandchildren of the Great Mother and Great Father. Nyame is the Great Mother and Great Father, called Amannee and Amen in ancient Kemet. Nyokompon and the Nyokonton are the Creator and Creatress, popularly called Ra and Ra'et in ancient Kemet. They are the grandchildren of the Supreme Being. So we talk about the nature of the Supreme Being, the nature of the Creator and Creatress, the nature of the Abosom, the forces in nature, the goddesses and gods, the spiritual forces that animate creation, the nature of the Nananon Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors in their relationship to us, the nature of the Krawa, the soul, the divine consciousness, which is a divinity that dwells in our head region that we are to align with, and all of spirituality revolves around what is encoded within our Krawa, our soul, our divine consciousness. So we go into detail about that kind of information, bringing clarity to these various concepts and aspects of culture, as well as ritual practices as well as our transcarnational inheritance as Akan people, coming originally from ancient Kana, a title of ancient Nubia. Our people originated in ancient Kana, the Kana land, the Kanit land. Some of our people migrated north to establish ancient Kemet. Thousands of years later, some of our people migrated west to reestablish the ancient empire of Kanat or Ghana a couple of thousand years ago. Some of our people, about 1,000 years later, migrated further south towards the forest belt, the regions of today's Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, and the Republic of Ghana, and reestablished Akan or Akana civilization in the forest belt region. And then a few hundred years later, some of our people were taken from those forest belt regions and forced into North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean and Europe during the Musu or Kessier, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. So this is the direct link between ancient Kana, Nubia, to West Afuraikai, towards the forest belt and into the Western Hemisphere. So we are the exact same people with the exact same culture, ancestral religious practices, and so forth. remain unchanged intergenerationally and transcarnationally for thousands of years. So we talk about our ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion from that perspective on Monday night. And also going over various documents and books that we have published. On Binada or Abinada on Tuesday night, we have our show Odwira. Okay, and the chat room is up now. Okay. So our show Odwira, which means purification, where we deal with Nana Som, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion in general, and its varied expressions, not just Akan, but also Yoruba and Igbo and Bakongo and the various expressions of our ancestral religious practices on the continent of Afuraitkaitnut, as well as how we preserve those traditions in the Western Hemisphere. For example, in the form of the Akan tradition, the Akan religion in North America being called Hoodoo, the Fon and Ebe tradition in North America being called Vodou, the Yoruba religion in North America being called Juju, being preserved by Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in North America, the various forms of the Bakongo tradition, Igbo traditions under the Gullah Geechee culture in North America. Of course, you find expressions of the Akan tradition and Yoruba tradition and Fon and Ebe traditions in Cuba and Jamaica and Haiti and Suriname and Brazil and so forth. Wherever we dropped down and were forced to migrate, we maintained our ancestral religious practice. And because we did so, those who maintained our ancestral religious practices, we maintained our adherence to divine order. And divine order is comprised of divine law, love, and divine hate, the expansive and contractive poles of divine order. So therefore, when we adhere to order, we adhere to divine law, and we also adhere to divine hate. So we accept that which is orderly, and we reject, repel that which is disorderly. And because we adhere to that notion of divine order, that real understanding of divine order, we armed ourselves to wage war against the whites and their offspring, freed ourselves from plantations, burned down plantations, freed our kith and kin from plantations, waged war against the whites and their offspring, intergenerationally, until we forced the end of enslavement in North America, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So this is what we deal with. We clarify text, concepts, philosophy, cosmology on our Odwira show, reading from text from ancient Kemet, Kanat, as well as contemporary Afuraitkaitnut, as well as our traditional practices as maintained in the Western Hemisphere. So we go into detail about that, showing how Odwira purification operationalizes Nana Som, operationalizes Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion, which in essence is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine vows. That is what ancestral religion is, no matter what expression, form it takes. Through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject. And we need to repel, we need to hate, to repulse, in order to restore balance to our lives, to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions. So it is through Jida, purification, that we operationalize Nana Som. We operationalize Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion, the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine vows. So that's what we deal with on our Odwira broadcast on Abinada Tuesday night. On Awukuda or Akwada Wednesday night, we have EGUA Marketplace. We have a number of individuals come onto the show showcasing their businesses, organizations, and institutions, how they are serving the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community in a positive capacity, and how their service to the community is informed by their ancestral religious practice. So we've had a number of guests come on, spend 2 hours talking about their businesses and so forth. We have a list of those businesses, which is also a growing list, an expanding list on our Okom Economic Development page. Because in the context of EGUA Marketplace, we have published the Okom Economic Development Model. That is an economic development model rooted in ancestral religious values, rooted in Nanason. So when you go to our Okom page on our website, OKOM, on our website, ojidafo.com, you can go and download the Okom Economic Development Model. You can also download the 4-part series we did on the Okom Economic Development Model on our Blog Talk show. We're dissecting the model, explaining all aspects of it, and showing how it applies to every aspect of our lives. Then we also have the broadcast EGUA, which is economic warfare, the reality that just as our ancestresses and ancestors, once they were forced into this hemisphere, they recognized that they were behind enemy lines. So every time they engaged with one another, shared information with one another, shared material goods with one another, they were sharing these things in the context of being behind enemy lines. So every share and exchange was rooted in striking against the enemy, recognizing that everything we utilized, every kind of information we shared, materials we shared, should be used towards our liberation and freedom from enslavement. In the same fashion, we must recognize that to date, at this point, we are not sovereign and independent on our own land and secure in that sovereignty, self-governing, and self-ruling. Until we get to that point, we are operating behind enemy lines. We are not in control of the governmental structure or the economic structure in the larger dominant society. Therefore, we are operating behind enemy lines. So anytime we engage in any form of exchange, cultural exchange, informational exchange, exchange of goods and services, utilize those goods and services, that information, those cultural exchanges as a means by which we strike against the enemy. Every exchange is a strike against enslavement, is a strike towards freedom and independence, sovereignty, and security in that sovereignty, because we must recognize that reality. So we deal with that in the EGUA Kodi broadcast, which is on that page as well. We also have the Quadifo, Ne Amambre, self-employment, and ancestral culture. We have that broadcast on the page as well. So when you go to the page, you'll see that. You'll also see the list of the various businesses, organizations, and institutions that have come onto the show and sat with us for 2 hours and gave us great interviews talking about their business, their organization, their philosophy, their work, service to the community, and so forth. So you can go and see their list of their links to their website. Also linked to the actual 2-hour interview they did with us. So you'll see that list, and it's an ever-growing list. Part of the Okom Economic Development Model is our strategy, which is to starve the beast and feed the prize. That means that every week we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites and their offspring. And therefore, we starve the beast and feed the prize. We reallocate those funds away from white businesses and reallocate them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks for capital infusion. That means when you make that assessment and you, instead of wasting $5 with Starbucks or $5 with McDonald's and so forth, you take that $10 you would have wasted with the whites and offspring through the course of the week, you starve that white beast and feed the prize. You make a donation to the business, organization, or institution of the week. If 1,000 of our people engage that process, of course, then that will be a $10,000 infusion of capital in the course of 7 days for a black business so that they can keep their doors open, expand their products and services to us, serve us at a greater capacity, employ people from our community, of course, so that they can serve us at a greater capacity and be employed by a black business, serving themselves, serving their families, serving their community. It's a win-win situation all around. If we do not do that, then by default, we are leaving that $10,000 per week in the hands of the whites and their offspring, our absolute enemies, so that they can serve their communities with our money, so that they can serve and, fund their children's activities, fund their own activities, expand business-wise in their own communities and so forth. So we starve the beast and feed the pride. We are in week number 19 with regard to our Starve the Beast, Feed the Pride movement. So when you look, again, on that page, the Oklahoma Economic Development page, you will see the list of businesses, and that list is an ever-growing list. We also do on the Marketplace Day show, EGUA show. Sometimes we will talk about the philosophy behind an ancestral approach to economics, an ancestral approach to nation building, institution building, and so forth. Tonight is one of those kinds of shows because what we want to do is a special episode in a sense. We are completing a 7-part series. This is part number 7. We're going to complete this 7-part series on ODWIRAMAN. And we started that series a couple of weeks ago, and we want to bring this final resolution to this series, the foundational series dealing with the nature of who we are as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, or African people in the Western Hemisphere as a collective, as a unique collective with shared experiences in the Western Hemisphere. We are a unique subset of the larger world community of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, or African people. And of course, we have published our book, Afuraitkaitnut, the origin of the name Africa, where we have proven conclusively, and we're the first and only to prove conclusively, that the name Africa comes directly from Afuraitkaitnut, and we show that in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet, and in the cosmology that supports those terms. So we are a unique collective amongst the body of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people because of what we have gone through, because of our shared ancestry, genetically. That means genetically because of what took place on the boats and on the plantations over the course of hundreds of years, as well as spiritually. Spiritually, returning through our blood circles, returning transcarnationally through our blood circles in the Western Hemisphere. So because of our experiences, because of our spirit-genetic inheritance, our transcarnational inheritance, we've become a unique group of people, interfacing with this region of Asafeafua and Asafeya, the two Earth Mother divinities, aligning with the energy of this region of Earth, incorporating the lessons we have learned, learning about the medicines that derive from the plant life and mineral life and animal life in this region of the Earth Mother, incorporating those things into our ancestral culture and so forth. We've become a unique people. We designate ourselves as ODWIRAMAN. Jida, in the language of ancient Kemet, means purification. It also means a celebration of purification. This is also why in the Akan language, the term Jida means purification, and it also means a celebration of purification, because the Akan language is directly derived of our ancient parent language of Kanat and Kemet, Nubia, and so-called Egypt. Just as the Yoruba and Ebe and Fon and Igbo and Bakongo and various languages are derived from that ancient ancestral parent language. What they call the Niger-Congo languages or Congo-Saharan languages and so forth, we're talking about the parent language of that designation. According to our own ancestresses and ancestors, words as written, for example, in the so-called Papyrus of Turin, dating the organizational structure, governmental structure of ancient Kanat and Kemet to over 42,000 years ago. So the language they were speaking is the same language they continue to speak, and once we dispersed from that region and migrated into north, central, west, south, Afuraitkaitnut, then we carried that language with us, and it developed on its own in these various regions and took on certain cultural variations. But at root, it is the same language. So Jida means purification. It also means the celebration of purification. Mind means a nation, a people, a polity in ancient Kemet as well as in the Akan language. But mind also means, mind or Manu also means the west in ancient Kemet, the region of the west, the region of the setting sun. So ODWIRAMAN is the purified Jida nation of mind in the west, Oman. We're talking about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people who have returned to our ancestral culture, restoring our ancestral culture, who, quote-unquote, died and resurrected, returning to our culture just like Asar Awusi died and was resurrected as a purified one. He's called Kaniti Amintiu, the first of the Amintiu, the first of the Westerners. He's also called Wabu, meaning the pure one, the purified one. So our people who have died and resurrected and are resurrecting our ancestral culture through our blood circles directly from our direct blood ancestresses and ancestors. We are in the Western Hemisphere. We are ODWIRAMAN. And when we, looking at one of our documents, when we talked about Kam-Ur and Kamet Uri, talking about Asar and Aset and enslavement and restoration of the ancestral culture and religion in the West, of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Amannee in the West. And we talk about the symbolism of Asar being killed and placed in a coffin and thrown into the river, thrown into the water, and then eventually Set finds the coffin of Asar, opens it up, carves up his body, and scatters the 14 pieces of the body into different parts. And then eventually his body is found by Set as well as other divinities, and then they reconstitute his body, remember his body, so to speak, purify him, mummify him, and eventually his spirit resurrects, and he becomes one with nature. He rises up, connects with Ra, and becomes the abosom in nature, regulating order, but also regulating the honored ancestresses and ancestors. In the same fashion, the king representing the nation is also Asar, the great black one, Kam-Ur, Kam meaning black, Ur meaning great. Kam-Ur, the great black one, the great black nation, being thrown into a coffin and fitted into a coffin. The great black nation being placed in the coffin and thrown in the river. Thrown into a coffin or so-called ships of enslavement, the great black nation thrown into the river by the reddish one. And then once we get to the shores of the West, in the Western Hemisphere of North America, Central America, the Caribbean, and so forth, South America, Europe, and so forth, then that coffin is opened up, and then the body is cut up into a number of different pieces. But eventually, those who were forced out of rulership, forced out of positions of authority, such as Set being forced out of rulership by Set, those who escaped from the plantation, escaped from enslavement and so forth, they sought to reconnect with those who were scattered on the plantations, reconstitute them so that they could resurrect our people from the plantations, free our people from the plantations, create Heru, give birth to Heru, give birth to the revolutionaries and so forth who would eventually overthrow the whites and their offspring and bring an end to enslavement. So that entire story of Asar, Set, Heru, Set, Nebuchadnezzar, and so forth, we go into that information as it relates to us, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the West. So we just talk about that and go into that information to show we are ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation in the West, those who died and who are resurrected, purified in our culture. We started that process defining ODWIRAMAN in that first broadcast, defining who we are as a collective, uniquely as ODWIRAMAN, as ODWIRAMAN folk, the group of people, folk who are of ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation in the West. Then the second broadcast, we talked about institution building and continuity in ODWIRAMAN. How once we understand our collective identity as a purified nation in the West, and that is who we are, and we take on that identity because that's in reality who we are, then we align with Ajo and Ajwa, or Asar and Aset, Batala and Oduduwa, Dangbe and Minona and so forth, Agu Isi, as they say in Igbo, and Idemili. They have regulatory functions in creation, which includes the establishment of civilization and the perpetuation, the continuity of civilization. That includes governmental structures, that include business structures as well. So when we align with Asar and Aset, established civilization, we can perpetuate civilization. So that is the cosmological foundation for institution building and continuity, the perpetuation of those institutions through the invocation of these forces in nature. And of course, all of our ancestral religious practices, our cultures, our languages, we have our own names for Asar and Aset, descriptive titles, but we're dealing with the same forces in nature. So we dealt with that concept, institution building and continuity. Then in the third installment of the ODWIRAMAN series, we talked about Nanason, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion, being the key to our liberation. Through ancestral religion, we purify ourselves, we incorporate law, and we restore balance. It is through those ritual practices that we operationalize Nanason. It is through the ritual practices that we incorporate order and we destroy disorder. Ancestral religion, when we become religiously convicted in reality, within divine order, we only seek to incorporate that which is in harmony with order and destroy, repel, hate, reject, expel that which is out of harmony with divine order. And we engage that process through ancestral religion. Religion animates the culture. So when we talk about the culture, we're talking about a religious foundation that animates our culture. So that's why we talk about Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion being the key to our liberation. When we're fully aligned spiritually, when we're engaged in religious practice, nobody can move you from that reality. When you contact the forces in nature that are connected to you by blood, when you contact your Nananom Nsamafo and are guided by them, when you align with Nyamewa, Nyame, or Amenet, Amen, then you have that kind of religious conviction that is unshakable, that is unmovable. And then you use that unmovable, unshakable religious conviction to defend your people, to establish your civilizations, perpetuate your civilizations, and so forth. So we dealt with that in detail in that third broadcast. In the fourth installment of ODWIRAMAN, we talked about Ebo, the nature of worth and value in ancestral economics. When we engage in an ancestral approach to economics and an ancestral understanding of Ebo, of value and worth, it's founded upon our identity. When we understand our identity as ODWIRAMAN, a purified nation, people who lost on the surface but then regained and restored our ancestral culture, and understanding the value of who we are as a unique group within the collective body of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the world. Once we have that unique understanding and have that value of ourselves, then we are naturally inclined to support one another in our business endeavors, in our economic endeavors. It's like different cells in the organs. When they function in accordance to who they are, they function interdependently. They don't have to be taught, hey, you need to work in harmony with these other cells. They don't need to be convinced. When they function in harmony with their nature, it's a natural inclination, an intrinsic, innate drive to work together interdependently with the other cells in the organ of which they are a component part. And then they understand their interdependent relationship instinctively to the other cells of the other organs and organ systems. So when we talk about Ebo, the nature of worth and value in ancestral economics, it is rooted in our identity. It's rooted in our understanding of who we are and our religious conviction, rooted in divine order. And then we move forward in a harmonious fashion. Okay, and so then we moved on and we talked about, in the fifth installment of the ODWIRAMAN series, we talked about Aban, the nature of government in ancestral culture, in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral culture, the philosophical foundation of a properly structured government, systems of governance and jurisprudence, which is the fifth principle of Ancestral nation building, establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence rooted in our cosmology, not an imitation of the governmental structures of the whites and their offspring, but we govern ourselves based on divine order. First, we attune to divine order. Of course, this is an orderly creation. When you look at the forces in nature, the deity, the children of the Supreme Being, They are the organs within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. The organs in your body regulate order in the body, and they function in a harmonious fashion. And the cells of the organs are the children of those organs. The organs themselves are the children of the great body. The forces in nature, the aboson, the orisha, the vodu, are the children and the organs within the great divine body of Amannee and Amen, or Nyame, the great mother and great father of the Supreme Being. So they are the regulators of order in the body. They are the embodiments of divine order within creation. When we align with them through spirit possession, spirit communication, we are able to align with order. And because we can align with the forces that actually undergird all order in creation, we can therefore replicate that order when we establish a social order rooted in the divine order of creation. We can establish a society. We can establish a governmental structure rooted in divine order that serves the needs of the people, properly redressing grievances, mitigating disputes, and so forth. So we dealt with this notion of Aban in the previous broadcast. And we just want to make sure we didn't miss anything here. Give us 1 second right quick. Just trying to pull up this document right quick. And again, on the phone line, for anybody, if you have any questions or comments, hit the number 1 on the phone line. And if you have if you'd like to interact in the chat room, just hit the, actually you need to log in as a user in the chat room in order to interact. If you do not have a login name, you can set up one very quickly in Blog Talk, and then you can interact in the chat room. And just give us 1 second. We're trying to roll up this. We have a couple of documents we want to pull up that we're going to focus on tonight, so we want to pull this up real quick. It'll take it a second to come up. And we won't, it looks like we won't have to reboot. Just give us 1 more second. It looks like it's, okay. All right, so they're coming up. And I'm going to put these links in the chat room real quick for the Patasa System and for actually, in fact, we'll just put the Nhoma link in the chat room, and that way, once you go to the Nhoma link, you can link to all of the publications there directly, including the Oberima Afurakani Meher. So, all right, so the 6th part in the series of the ODWIRAMAN series was last night, as a matter of fact. And what we dealt with was the incorporation of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit town. We were talking about Kuro, which means town or village, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African town incorporation movement. So when we're talking about being ODWIRAMAN, the Purified Nation in the West, we have a 2-pronged approach when we're dealing with independence and sovereignty and security in that sovereignty and defense of that sovereignty. There are some people on one of those prongs establishing independence by repatriating to the continent of Afuraikai, and establishing community there. That's one of the prongs of that 2-pronged approach. There are some people, of course, in reality that will not be able to do that within the next 5 years or the next 10 years. So in the meantime, for individuals, because of family reasons, because of family illnesses, because of children or whatever the case may be, individuals who are not able to relocate to the continent, who want to maintain some and establish some, the closest form of autonomy imaginable in this area, then we're talking about the establishment of our own community, establishment and the incorporation of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit town, city. This is an ancestral precedent that has been set by our people here right in North America. Not only thousands of years ago, we've always established cities, towns, villages in ancient Afuraitkai, wherever we have lived. But in this hemisphere, during enslavement, those who waged war against the whites and their offspring freed themselves and established independent sovereign nations and defended those nations intergenerationally against the whites and their offspring. After the end of enslavement, because we forced the end of enslavement. After the end of enslavement, we also had that tradition of our people establishing independent towns, villages, and then incorporating towns and establishing their own government structure, mayor, city council, and so forth, our own chief of police, own justice department, own judges, and so forth, incorporating towns, controlling the land, controlling the government, controlling the economics in the town, and so forth. That is an ancestral precedent set by our own direct blood ancestresses and ancestors. And of course, that is the second prong of that approach in ODWIRAMAN, the Purified Nation in the West. As long as we are here, we're going to move, we're going to live somewhere instead of living in the city or living just outside of the city in a town or a suburb and so forth. We have the capacity to establish and incorporate our own towns and control the politics, the economics, the government in the town. So we went into detail about that last night. And tonight for the seventh piece, and of course this is a 7-part series based on the forces in nature, the abosom, the deities that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which govern the 7-day week. That 7-day week is based on that natural of the abosom, the forces in nature that animate those bodies and those solar, lunar, and planetary bodies moving within that cycle every 7 days, govern all of the natural cycles on Earth. They also govern the natural chronobiological cycle called the circumseptan cycle, the 7-day cycle that occurs within our bodies. That's a natural biological cycle. So these forces in nature, because they govern that 7-day cycle and all natural cycles on Earth, when we have a 7-pronged approach or a 7-stage or 7-module approach to specific information, whether it's Odwira Afurakani manhood, 7 principal values of manhood, Ancestral, 7 principal values of nation building. The Akan people, of course, have a 7-day week, and we structure our society around those 7 days and the energy that governs those 7 days, including naming practices and so forth. The same occurs here. We have this 7-part series on ODWIRAMAN. Therefore, the abosom, they govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which regulate all cycles. They give their input into each one of these 7 parts of this series of dealing with ODWIRAMAN. And as you look through and listen to these 7 parts, you will be able to identify in each one of the 7 the different abosom that govern the days of the week in the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which govern that specific component of the 7-part series. Each one is in alignment. So, for example, the 4th part, Ebo, the nature of worth and value in ancestral economics. That was the 4th part of the series. The 4th day of the week is Awukuada, which is Wednesday. And, of course, Kwekua Nansi, dealing with media of exchange, economics, and so forth. So, this part 7, we're dealing with Amannee. Oman means nation, once again, and Adye means things, objects, deeds, or entities. So, Amannee are the things of the nation, talking about the customs, the traditions of the nation, talking about the culture. So there's a specific term for culture, Amambere, the way of the Oman of the nation, and then of course Amannee are the customs or the tradition. So when we look, for example, on our Nanasom page, we have a Ahinasa, a triangle, and we're dealing with governmental structure. At the apex of the triangle, and this is on a personal level, like the apex of the triangle is your okra, your soul, your divine consciousness. In the head region, the apex, the top of the triangle, everything was encoded within your pride, your divine consciousness, the deity dwelling in your head region. What is encoded in that divinity, that force in nature, is your function to execute in the world and the manner in which you must execute that function in the world. And also the spiritual forces you have been assigned in a specific configuration by the Supreme Being to support that function you are given. So at the apex of that triangle is the Okrawa, the soul, the divine consciousness, your spiritual head. The bottom right-hand corner of the triangle, you'll see the abosom, the forces in nature, the divine forces in nature, the goddesses and gods and so forth. They give us the power to execute what is in our divine function, what is encoded within our spiritual head. In the bottom left-hand corner of the triangle, the Ahinasa, are the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. So the bottom right and left corners of the Ahinasa, the triangle, of the abosom on the bottom right-hand corner, the powers that replenish your energy, they empower us to execute our function. And the left-hand corner, the Nananum Unsamafo, they give us the guidance on how to utilize that power that comes from the abosom in order to execute our function in a harmonious fashion without creating disorder within ourselves. And the reason why the Nananum Unsamafo can give us that kind of guidance is because we must utilize the power of the forces in nature based on our direct descent, based on our blood circle, based on our ancestors. And the Nananum Unsamafo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, are that class of ancestresses and ancestors who manifested divine order, those who lived in harmony with divine order, who lived in harmony with the energy that was coming from the abosom, utilized it in a harmonious fashion without profaning it, so that they can execute their function in creation, and became models to emulate within society, because they navigated their way through life in harmony with order, utilizing that divine energy in the process, and they can show us, their direct blood descendants, on how to use that energy of the forces in nature in a harmonious fashion based on our blood descent, based on our patriclan and matriclan descent. Because we have different clans, we have different ethnic groups within Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit culture collectively. We have a specific means by which we must embrace culture and live in harmony with order. So the key is the bottom right corner of the triangle, the bottom left corner of the triangle, the abosom and Unsamafo, Nananum Unsamafo. But that's the base. And those the right and left corners support the apex. And what's in the apex is your okra, your soul, your divine consciousness, the function you are to execute in the world. And the inner space is the obrawa, the divine living energy that permeates all of created existence. That's that superstructure. That triangle, that ahinasa, that's a superstructure that governs all of our activities. However, there is a societal ahinasa, a societal structure as well. So when you look on the Nanasom page, and we'll put the link in the chat room real quick, the Nanasom page on our website, this is where you'll see that. We look at that societal ahinasa. And what you have at the apex, where the okrawa, the head, the soul, divine consciousness, the apex of the triangle, the top point, you have Ancestral, nation building, restoration. The bottom right-hand corner, where the abosom exists in the person, is nanasom within the society, within the Oman. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. The invocation of the abosom, the evocation of the divinity, the ancestresses and ancestors. Nanasom in the right-hand corner. The bottom left-hand corner of the triangle, the ahinasa, is amamre, ancestral culture, the way of the nation, the manner in which we function, things we do and things we should not do. So again, you have this ahinasa, this triangle on a societal level. On the individual level, the apex is your own cry, your own spiritual head. And the bottom right and left-hand corners are the deities, the powers in creation, and the ancestresses and ancestors, the one who give guidance on how to utilize that power to support what's in the head, support what's in the apex. In the same fashion, the Oman is an entity, a living entity in and of itself, the nation. We as a nation of people, a collective of people, we are an entity, a living body, just like your cells comprise a living body. A nation itself is a living entity. We live in harmony with order. It's a living entity, this living body. We as a nation will have a harmonious life as a nation, and will expand and grow and develop. If we get out of harmony with order, the nation will become sick. The nation as a collective body can die, but it can also resurrect, like Asa. So the Oman is a nation. It is an entity. It has an apex as well. And at the apex of the national or the Oman triangle, Ahinasa, is Ancestral, nation building, nation restoration. The bottom right-hand corner that's supporting Ancestral, supporting the apex, is Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. In the bottom left-hand corner of the triangle, the Ahinasa, supporting nation building, supporting the apex, is Amamre, culture, the way of the people. And what we would say that governs the entire triangle is Amannee, custom, and tradition. And this is what we're talking about tonight, the customs and tradition. So let's go real quickly. And if you go to the Punhoma page on the website, you can go directly to, we're going to go to a section of our publication, Odwira Afurakani Man, where we address this specific issue dealing with ancestry in particular. And we'll give you the page in a second. And it's actually the 7th section, of course, in the book. And we'll give you a page real quick. Hold on as we pull it up. And of course, again, the Odwira Afurakani Manhood book in 7 sections, according to the Abosom, the forces in nature that govern all natural cycles, that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, which govern the 7 days of the week. This 7-section book is based on the 7 principal values of Odwira, of Afurakani Manhood. Each day of the week, the individual has an opportunity to refine his character, refine his focus, refine his drive based on the energy that governs the day. And that principal value of manhood is related to the energy that governs the day. All right. So, first, we'll go through the seven principal values of manhood. And yes, people have asked the book, Obatain, Afuraitkaitnut, Womanhood, 7 principal values of womanhood as well, based on the divinities that govern the 7 days of the week. That book is coming out this year as well. So these, as we go through these, you'll see, even though there will be slight variation, very slight variations, but the same principle, foundational principles you will find with regard to manhood and womanhood, with slight variations based on gender, the fundamental principles are the same. So as we go through these, even though this book is dealing with manhood, you'll see these principles are universal for both. All right, so the first principal value is order. Recognize the divine order of creation, the balance of male and female, rooted in that foundational relationship of Amannee and Amen, the great mother and the great father, 2 entities who function together harmoniously in complementarity as one divine unit, the supreme being. That is the balance of male and female that permeates all of creation, the balance of male and female. And we must recognize that first. If you don't recognize the balance of male and female, recognize and align with Amannee and Amen, then everything you engage in, all your thoughts, intentions, and actions will be imbalanced from the gate. So first we must recognize order, the divine balance of male and female. Once we recognize that order exists and align with that, the next piece is balance. Establish that balance in every aspect of your existence, balancing your emotions, balancing your physical activity with regard to work and recreation and building and family and everything else, balancing every aspect of your lives, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and so forth. Establishing that balance in every aspect of our existence, individually, on the family level, as well as the communal level, and the world Afurakani body level. The third piece is arm. Arm yourself to defend the order and balance with your life. So first you recognize the divine order, then you establish that order, that balance within your life. And once you've established that within yourself, establish that within your family, establish that in connection with other families in the community and forming a collective, now you must arm yourself to defend that order and balance, that community that you have established, because, of course, the whites and offspring are parasites, and they will only seek to destroy anything we build. That is without exception. Arm ourselves on every level. Physical armament, metal armament, chemical and biological weapons as well. The next piece is respect. Continuously respect. Review every thought, intention, and action, and harmonize each with divine order. And we include a 7-part decision-making process, a sound decision-making process, so that we arrive at sound decisions rooted in divine order. That 7-stage decision-making process, of course, is rooted in this 7-stage cycle governed by the Abosom, the forces of nature. So it's a holistic decision-making process, the Nyansapo, divine wisdom decision-making process. So we respect or we review every thought, intention, and action and harmonize each with divine order throughout the course of our lives. That is the difference between adults and children. That is what places you in adulthood and removes you from childhood. There are only two hoods that you can live in, of course, either childhood or adulthood. And when you constantly and consistently and continuously respect and review every thought, intention, and action, and harmonize each with divine order, ascribe the values of divine order to every thought, intention, and action, now you are engaged in proper judgment on a regular basis, and proper judgment is a hallmark of maturity, and therefore you have embraced manhood and womanhood on a fundamental level. The next piece is insight. Exercise proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life and achieve individual manhood and, of course, individual womanhood. So we just went through that, and that is rooted in that decision-making process, which leads to insight. Once you exercise that insight on a regular basis, you can make those proper judgments consistently. You've embraced manhood and womanhood on an individual level. But once you recognize you're a fully grown man and a fully grown woman, then the next piece is marriage. Participate fully in the divine order of creation through uniting with the Afuraitkaitnit female, who is your balance. On the other side, with the Afurakani male, who is your balance if you're a female. Of course, we do not deal with this sexuality, homosexuality that is perverse. It is insane. It's you're out of your mind if you're engaged in that perverse. That is the pseudo-perverse culture of the whites and their offspring. It is absolutely hated by the supreme being, the forces in nature, ancestresses and ancestors, and your own krawa, your own soul, your own divine consciousness. The only balance of the Afurakani man is the Afuraitkaitnit woman. The only balance of the Afuraitkaitnit woman is the Afurakani man. The only balance of Afuraitkaitnit people as the only created people are the uncreated people, which are the ancestresses and ancestors. The whites and their offspring are not the balance of black people. They are the perversion of people, not the balance of people. The balance of a man is not a man with a broken leg. That's the perversion of a man. The balance of a man is a woman. The balance of Afuraitkaitnit people are not white people. It's not the balance of black and white. They are denatured spirits of disorder. That means white Europeans, white Americans, white Hindus, white Asians, white Europeans, white Arabs, Latinos, and so forth, pseudo-Native Americans who are just Asians. These are the whites and their offspring, and all of them incarnate as spirits of disorder without exception and are divinely hated, rejected. They are not the balance of us at all. They are perversion of humanity, not the balance of any aspect of Afuraitkaitnit people who are the only true created humanity. And then the final piece is ancestry. Understand that order, meaning divine order, can only be achieved through your specific Afuraitkaitnit cultural context. And then you achieve communal manhood or womanhood. So that's what we want to get to tonight. This notion of ancestry in our specific cultural context. Some people will try to say, well, culture is not important. We just need to be focused on economics. Culture is not important. We just need to be focused on politics. That's idiotic. And that comes directly from the minds of the whites and their offspring, poisoning the minds of our people. They understand that our culture is our defense against the whites and their offspring and their culture, their perversity. So while they're constantly promoting their perverse way of life, their perverse culture, they're getting our people to be idiotic and foolish, walking around talking about culture is not important, while all along they are in alignment with the culture, the way of life of the whites and their offspring. So let's get into this notion of culture and, of course, the overarching piece of Amannee, customs, traditions, cultural traditions, and so forth, and being the key, as we talk about in the promotion of the show and the name of the show, the key to our integrity. Amannee, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral cultural traditions are the key to our integrity as ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation in the West. And of course, it's the key to integrity for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in general. So our culture specifically has specific unique culture of the Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. We have our own unique approach to life based on our experiences, our shared experiences, and our transcarnational inheritance. That culture that we have developed and forged here is the key to our integrity. Just like the cultural expressions that are forged on the continent are the key to their integrity. We don't reject our own culture, denigrate our own culture, assume that we don't have a culture here, and then seek to simply imitate the contemporary expressions of culture on the continent and say once we imitate that, then we become African. If we just imitate them, walk around like them, tilt our heads like them, and so forth, now we're true Africans because we're imitating. That's nonsensical, it's idiotic, it is childish, it's infantile. You are Afuraitkaitnit by birth, before you come into the womb. When you have a real understanding of what Afuraitkai means, as we prove in our book, we're talking about the Ka at the land of Afura, the creator and creatress. But Ka and Ka also means soul and divine consciousness. So you have a Ka at a soul, a divine consciousness. And Ra and Ra'et move within your spirit body and your physical body, move within your flesh, your Afu. So Afuraikai defines us into the world, animated by the energy of Ra and Ra'et, governed by our Ka and our Ka'et. So when you know who you are as Afuraitkaitnit people, then you don't seek to imitate contemporary expressions on the continent. You recognize you have developed a culture right here in ODWIRAMAN in the West. And then when we adhere to that ancestral culture we have developed, rooted in divine order, not perversions of that culture, because, of course, some of the culture has been perverted here in the West as well. But once we purge them, purify our culture of those perversions, vestiges of Christianity or Islam or white culture and so forth, and restore our pure culture. And again, Nanasom religion animates the culture. So we start off with our ancestral religion, and that's what animates the culture. So when you reestablish Hoodoo, for example, reestablish Juju, for example, reestablish Voodoo, for example, in North America, purging it, purifying it of the corruption and perversity of Christianity, Christian influences, Jewish influences, Hindu influences, or the whites and their offspring influences over the past few decades. You purge it of that foolishness, then you return to a pure culture as formulated and manifest right here in the Western Hemisphere. And you embrace that because that animates, that ancestral religious practice animates your culture. And that is the key to our integrity as a people. So, let's get to this section. The page in the Obedima Afurakani Manhood book is page number 41. And again, even though the book is written for the Afurakani Obedima Afurakani man, these principles apply and will be, exist within the Obatan, the Afuraitkaitnit womanhood book as well. Only slight variations based on the shift in energy dealing with gender. So there are certain expressions that are unique to the female that are different for the male, but the undergirding principal values are the same. They just are expressed different. So the seventh principal value of Obedima directs us to ancestry. Understand that order, meaning divine order. That's why we capitalize the letter O. Understand that order can only be achieved through your specific Afuraitkaitnit cultural context. And then we talk about communal manhood. The Afurakani Obedima, Afurakani man, through the various principal values, and we're talking about the previous 6 leading up to this final 7th one, through the various principal values, has recognized, embraced, and actualized himself, properly defined his individuality, his value. However, the Afurakani Obedima man recognizes the reality that his individual identity is interconnected with those of his specific ancestral blood circle. He is a component part of a system, and therefore he does not exist in isolation. Amamre, culture, specific way of life, is written into our Okrawa, in the form of the Nkra, the Nkravia, the divinely allotted given function to execute in creation. And it is made manifest in our moja, in our blood. So you have a divine function encoded within your spirit's brain. Your physical brain regulates order in the physical body. Your spirit's brain, that fourth nature in the head region of your spirit body, regulates order in the spirit body. It can do that because encoded within your spirit's brain is the blueprint of how you are to function in creation. Just like encoded in your physical brain in the right and left hemisphere of the cerebral cortex and the right and left hemisphere of the cerebellum, encoded within the physical brain is the blueprint upon which you are to function in creation, harmonious. The same with the Okra, the divinity that dwells in your head region. Written into that is the Nkra, the Nkravia, your divine function, the manner in which you are to execute your function in creation. Nkra and Nkravia is made manifest in our moja, in our blood. Now we're talking about transcarnational inheritance, direct blood ancestry. All Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut need water to survive and function harmoniously. However, we cannot take in water in the same manner that fish take in water. We cannot imitate their culture, their way of life, living. If we attempted to do so, we would attempt to take in water by breathing underwater, resulting in our own demise. We must recognize that we are comprised of the same element as other created entities such as fish and, of course, plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life. We are all part of this Earth Mother. We are comprised of the same element of all other created entities, such as fish. However, our structure is such that we have to follow certain protocols, certain patterns of behavior in order to function properly. There are dietary needs that differ between the Afurakani Oberima man and the Afuraitkaitnit Oba woman, because our systems are similar but different. There are dietary needs that differ between the Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit Opanyi, adult, and the Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit Oba, the child, because of the different stages of development. Afurakani Mberima of different energy configuration have differing energetic needs. We are similar but different. It is through our Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit ancestral amambre, ancestral culture, the great reservoir of over 1 million generations of earthly experience, cataloged by our Nananum Nsamanto, that we learn about our commonalities and our differences and structure our lives and behavior accordingly. All of the cells of the body are quote-unquote body cells. That's a reality. However, they are configured differently, and their function in the body is an expression of their specific configuration. Liver cells are part of the liver family, clan. They cannot execute the functions of lung cells. Lung cells are part of the lung family, clan. They cannot execute the functions of immune system cells. Immune system cells are part of the immune system family, clan. They cannot execute the functions of bone marrow cells and so on. However, as they all execute their specific functions in harmony with their divine design, the body functions in its natural, harmonious state. Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, the only human being created by Nyame wa Nyame, are cells within the great divine body of Nyame wa Nyame, or Amenet and Amen. The divine organs of Nyame wa Nyame are the Aboson, the Orisha, the Vodou, the spirit forces in nature, operating through and animating the stars, planets, oceans, earth, winds, fire, air, thought patterns, divine intelligence, and more. We, born into the world through one of the planetary bodies, Asase, earth, are cells within one of these great divine organs systems. We are further defined by the specific ancestral blood circle we have incarnated through. One Abusiakuo matrilineal clan may be governed by a fiery Abosan. The members of that particular Abusiakuo will manifest fundamental character traits associated with that spirit force. They will also have certain dietary, social, and other protocols and restrictions that members of other Abusiakuo clans, matriclans, who may be governed by a watery Abosom may not have. On a fundamental level, there are substances in different foods that are allergens for one individual, while another individual can eat the same food and not develop an allergic reaction at all. All allergens are not related to the divine restrictions, echiwadye, of an abosom. There are some that do carry divine sanction. They demonstrate a fundamental difference, a uniqueness manifest from one Afuraitkaitnit individual to the next. They also demonstrate the reality that if our natural, divinely created differences are not respected, honored, and valued, we will suffer. Indeed, we can die from a basic allergic reaction, as well as from not respecting an echiwadye, a taboo or divine prohibition. So we need to marinate on that for a second. Just based on the mundane level of echiwadye or taboo, allergens for some people, even within your own family. You may be able to eat nuts or certain kinds of nuts, and then your sibling cannot consume those because they develop a severe allergic reaction, having to get medical treatment, seek medical attention. You're from the same womb, from the same mother and father, but there's something unique within you, something unique within the sibling that must be recognized, that must be respected, that must be realized, that must be reviewed. If you do not respect the differences, then you can cause suffering. You could even lead to death because you're not respecting the differences between the two. The same is true with regard to us spiritually and culturally and spirit genetically. There are differences between us, differences between clans, but also on a greater collective level. Differences between the Afuraitkaitnit people in the West, ODWIRAMAN, and other Afuraitkaitnit groups in the East as well as on the continent and so forth. Those differences must be respected because of the different experiences we have gone through and the kind of identity we have forged and the kind of energy we have brought into our being, the kind of energy we have interfaced with in this region of the Earth Mother, incorporated it harmoniously. We still have the same genetics and so forth that we had when we came from the continent, but in addition to that, we have interfaced with this region of the Earth Mother, been possessed by the abosom as they manifest in this region of the Earth Mother with a slightly different energy. Once that energy moves through our bodies through spirit possession, it transforms our cells, and then when we have children, the sperm and ova that are transmitted to create the bodies of our children are resonating at a slightly different frequency because of the nature of interaction with the abosom, the forces of nature in this region of the Earth Mother. And therefore, we have a slightly different approach. The ritual songs are slightly different. The ritual dances are slightly different. The foods are slightly different. There are certain allergens that we have developed, certain echiwadye taboos that we have developed, certain dietary taboos that we have developed, certain social taboos that we have developed based on our experience. We must recognize that, just like you recognize an allergen in your family that somebody on the continent may not have. If they say, oh, you can eat this food, we eat this food on the continent all the time, and all black people can eat it. But they don't know what happened in your family. You eat that food, and then somebody in the family gets sick, or even the worst case scenario, they die because you're not respecting your difference. You're not living in harmony with who you are. The same is true spiritually. You don't just let somebody give you a ceremony and say, well, this is what we do, this is what we've always done. We're going to do this ceremony for you. We're going to sacrifice this animal for you because this is what, the divination said. You must run that by your own crowd. You must run that by your own nananum instamanto, your spiritually cultivated ancestors. You must run that by the abosom that were born into the world with you. You don't just go along with what somebody says because they say, well, this is what we've always done. Because they're not respecting your differences. It is incumbent upon us to respect our own differences and move forward based on our own culture. We have a real culture, and it's just as legitimate and valid as the cultural expressions of our brothers and sisters on the continent. It's not that theirs is superior and ours is inferior. That's insane. We are ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation in the West. So, when an Afurakani Oberima, after having cultivated his awareness of his unique place in creation, has balanced that awareness with the Afuraitkaitnit Oba woman, whom is his other half, they together must recognize as a newly fused divine unit capable of bringing an ancestor or ancestress back into the world, back into a family that the amamre, the culture, established by and transmitted by the Nananum Nsamanfo, is an entity within which they must operate within the culture. An entity. A cell cannot live outside of its family, clan, organ, or organ system. An Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit individual cannot function harmoniously in creation outside of the divinely structured amamre, or culture, that he or she is born into, that he or she has inherited. Again, that's transcarnational inheritance. The internalization and operationalizing of this reality completes the Afurakani Oberima, for he has crossed the threshold of communal manhood. So that is the crux of talking about culture as an entity, a reality. This is not something that you can just choose. You can just decide, oh, I'm going to participate in this culture, I'm not. Land animal can't just decide, well, I'm an animal. The fish are animals. We're all animals. We have eyes. We have mouths. We need oxygen. We're all animals. We're all part of the animal realm. So I'm going to leave my culture alone as a lion or a lioness, and I'm just going to follow the culture of another animal, because after all, we're all animals. And therefore, they seek to attempt to operate within the cultural milieu or environment of the fish, and of course, they drown. That's insane. The fact that the whites and their offspring put forth this notion, and then our people pick it up and repeat that nonsense that, culture isn't important, you don't know who you are, you've been mixed up, so you really don't have a culture, and culture really isn't that important, you're American, and, just go along with whatever anybody else is doing and being open to all, quote-unquote, cultures and cultural diversity, all of that nonsense. That's a ploy to get us to be self-destructive. That's just like somebody recognizing that your children have certain allergens, and then they teach you and your children, hey, you're a human being, you eat food, you can eat whatever you want, and don't let anybody tell you you can't eat whatever you want, because you have a digestive system, and as long as you can chew the food and swallow it, you can eat what anybody else eats, and if somebody tries to keep you from eating what they're eating, they're trying to control you, and don't let them put you in a box. You eat whatever you want. They're deliberately trying to kill your children. That's what the whites and their offspring are trying to do to us when they culturally massacre us, when they try to teach us we don't have a culture, we shouldn't focus on culture and so forth. Because they know that fundamentally, Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion animates the culture. They don't want us to embrace culture, because then we would embrace a natural way of life and functioning in the world. That means we will be rooted in Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion, which means we will be rooted in divine order, which means we will be rooted in the incorporation of divine law and the rejection of disorder, the restoration of divine balance. That means we will seek to incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities ritually that we need to incorporate to establish order within our lives, and we will seek to destroy, to kill the purveyors of disorder and destroy disorder through ancestral religious ritual and through physical movement, physical activity, warfare, arms, and so forth, to destroy disorder and its purveyors. So they have to keep us away from that. They don't want us to become religiously convicted, because once we become convicted religiously, then nothing can stop us from establishing our civilization, establishing order, and destroying, exterminating our enemies who seek to disrupt that order that we have established. So they have to keep us away from culture. So they float all these ideas about it's not important to embrace culture and you need to embrace whatever they put forward. This is key. And this is why we're talking about integrity. When you recognize your differences, recognize your uniqueness, recognize your place in creation individually, as well as a group, as well as a unique group in the Western Hemisphere, then you maintain your integrity by following the culture that is woven into you, into your krawa, individually, as well as the collective krawa, the soul of the people. The final part of this piece, and because we're in this particular piece, each section is governed by the abosom that governs the solar, lunar, and planetary body. So we talk about the planetary body, Herukapet, or Amannee, which is the planet Saturn, the male force that animates that planet is the divinity Men, also called Amen in ancient Kemet. He's called Amen in Akan as well, and this is why Saturday is Min Mini Da, the day of Amen in Akan culture. And of course, one of the forms of Het, Heru, in ancient Kemet is Min Minit. She is the wife of Amen Min. And of course, that union of Amen Min and Min Minit in ancient Kemet becomes the union of Amen Min and Amen Miniwa in the Akan tradition. It is also in the Yoruba tradition the union of Orisha Oko and Oshun Ibu Dioko, meaning Oshun, the wife of Oko. Of course, sometimes Oshun is the wife of Shango, but in a different capacity. That force of nature is Oshun Ibu Dioko, Oshun, the wife of Oko. Orisha Oko is Amen Min. So that union of quote-unquote Min and Hathor in ancient Kemet, Min and Het Heru, you find that same union across the board all over the continent. In this context, we're talking about Amen Min. Amen Min is the furthest of the planetary bodies visible to the eye of the average Afuraitkaitnut individual. It completes the cycle of the planetary bodies with the widest or all-encompassing orbit of the Odwira, the sun. While there are other planetary bodies in the universe, it is of great importance that we recognize the value of those which we can see. The light of the planetary bodies that we can see penetrates the eye, and stimulates physiological processes which affect thought and behavior. The light is also an energy connection, like a spider's web from one living entity to another. We are able to use the light energy of that which we can see to connect with the energy of the abosom governing the body planet. In this manner, we gain direct insight into the working of that force in nature and its working within ourselves. These are two of the many reasons why our ancestresses and ancestors focus on the planetary cycle of Odwira, the sun, animated by Awusi, Asurani, the moon, animated by Ajwa, Binna, and Abina, Awuku, Akua, Yao, Ya, Aba, Afi, and Amen Min, the abosom that govern us 7 days of the week. Because Amen Min's reach is greatest, because his birth is the widest, because Amen Min completes the cycle, the abosom Amen Min is recognized in Akan culture as the ancient one, the elder, he who knows the antidote for the serpent's bite. Amen Min is the divine repository of Amamre, of culture. The energetic effect of Amen Min on Asase on Earth, meaning the planet Saturn upon Earth, is manifest through the axis, the magnetic pole running through the planet, constantly transmitting and processing the various projections from all of the other celestial bodies. The central axis running through your body, fired by the marrow in your bone, continuously transmitting and processing the energetic contributions from the organs and organ systems within you. And the projections coming from those outside of you affect the manner in which your attraction to and repulsion from certain activities, individuals, and entities shape your way of interacting, your way of life, your amamre, your culture. And Afurakani Oberima gains experience by properly engaging and assessing the value of these transmissions. He catalogs his findings in the process, which confirms the value of his inherited amamre or culture. He himself is then able to transmit this amamre or culture to others without profaning it. He thus becomes an example of Oberima for those Afurakani males who are coming behind him and for those who were with or ahead of him but have yet to harmonize their thoughts, intentions, and actions with Nyame Wa, Nyame, and Sheshe. So let's go back quickly. Your attraction to or repulsion from certain activities, individuals, and entities shape your way of interacting, your way of life, your amamre, your culture. So when you have a natural attraction towards certain thoughts, intentions, actions, events, activities, and so forth, individuals, entities, and you also have a repulsion from certain thoughts, certain intentions, certain actions, events, activities, groups, and so forth, that attraction and repulsion, you're dealing with you being shaped in a certain fashion. Where are these attractions and repulsions coming from? You experience them. There are certain things you're drawn to and certain things you're not. Sometimes it can be based on conditioning, but the primary conditioning, real conditioning, is coming from what is coded within your kra, your soul, your divine consciousness. Just like animals are attracted to certain things and repelled by certain things, and they move away from certain things. In the same fashion, we are encoded within our krawat, and because we are encoded with a specific manner in which to execute our functioning creation, we are encoded with culture that will manifest energetically as attraction to and repulsion from thoughts, intentions, actions, individuals, entities, events, and so forth. That shapes us. It shapes our way of interacting, the way we move in the world. It shapes our way of life. It shapes our amambre. It is a manifestation of our culture, our way, bere, of the Oman, of the nation, of the people. And then we say an Afurakani oberima gains experience by properly engaging and assessing the value of these transmissions. So as we said, sometimes things can be based on conditioning. You learn some misinformation from somebody as a child or as an adult. You incorporate that in your mind. You remember it. You condition yourself with it. And then you have a pseudo-attraction, a pseudo-repulsion to certain thoughts, intentions, and actions, like an addiction to drugs. Once the poison gets in your system, you create an artificial attraction for that poisonous substance until you break that addiction. In the same fashion, when you are drugged mentally with foolish ideas, self-destructive ideas, and you incorporate those things, you develop an unnatural attraction for those ideas and behaviors that support those ideas and attract you to those kinds of ideas. That's false conditioning. But when you align with your krawa, the abosom that governs you, and you align with your nananum and samapo, you purge those conditions. You purge those thoughts, intentions, and actions that are self-destructive. And then the only thing you have left are the natural attractions and the natural repulsions that are rooted in the emanations from your krawa. So this is why we say we gain experience by properly engaging and assessing the value of these transmissions. We catalog our findings in the process, which confirms the value of our inherited culture. So as we find out why we are attracted to certain things, why we're repulsed from certain things, we catalog those, we remember those, and that confirms our inherited culture, because then we look into our culture, we find out that these are taboos and these are social taboos and dietary and ritual and so forth that have been cataloged as part of the culture, and through your experience, you can match up your experience, your finding with that which has already been cataloged, and they will match up, and therefore you begin to really value your culture, your inherited culture, because you can see it's based on reality. You can see why you were taught these things ever since you were a child. Now you're experiencing them, you're cataloging the results for yourself and matching your catalog up with the cultural catalog, and they are in alignment. Then we are able to transmit this culture. We have, through experience, cataloged our findings, the way we must move in the world in a harmonious fashion. Then we are able to, and then we live that culture consistently without profaning ourselves in the process. Then we can transmit that culture to others without profaning it. We thus become an example for other Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people who are coming behind us. Therefore, we become nananum mpanyimpo, as we say in the Akan tradition, honored elders and elderesses, spiritually cultivated elders and elderesses, because we lived in harmony with divine order consistently without fail. We've achieved that subain pa, that sacred character that we talked about, achieved that perfection, which is our destiny in reality. We are to crystallize into that perfected state. Idiotic notion that there's no such thing as perfection in human beings comes from the whites and their offspring, because they are inferior. We are designed to crystallize into perfection so that we align every thought, every intention, and every action with divine order. By the time we achieve elderhood, we manifest subain pa, or divine or sacred character. And once we do so, then we become nananum mpanyimpo. When we make our transition, we move directly into the position of nananum nsamapo, the class of ancestral spirits who are spiritually cultivated and who have the responsibility and the capacity to assist us in our development, because they perfect themselves here in the world. So we become that model to emulate in society as nananum mpanyimpo, spiritually cultivated elders and elders. and we're also a model for those who are coming after us, as well as those who were ahead of us who had never harmonized their thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, who still have a chance to get back in harmony with order before they make their transition. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about this notion of Amambra culture being the bottom left corner of the triangle, Nanasom, ancestral religion, the bottom right corner of the triangle, and then the apex is Ancestral, nation building, restoration of a nation, restoration of an entity, an Oman. We are an Oman, a nation in miniature. Your physical body is a nation in miniature. The Oman itself, the nation, is a collective of component parts. It is an entity, a living entity. And when we deal with Nanasom and Amambra ancestral religion and ancestral culture, it supports the nation building process, the restoration process. In total, the energy that permeates that entire triangle, that Ahinasa, is Amannee cultural tradition, custom. This is what we're dealing with. So, we're going to go to the phone line. See, we had a call on the phone line. If you have a question in the chat room, of course, you can. On the phone line, Michiawo, number 8581. You got a question or a comment?
Yes, Michiano. Yes, I had a question and sort of a question and comment. How is everyone this evening? The question I had was in regards to the culture, Akan culture, African culture, according to marriage and the rites of passage, and I guess what I want to know with us being so contaminated with the white spirits of disorder, Western, ways, and I kind of know that we had the elders to help us in those things of decisions of marriage and things like that. I don't know if that's the way it went. I think that's how it goes. But my question is that when, as a clan, do you marry within the clans, or would that be considered incest? Or is that a term that only the, white spirits of disorder carry? Is that something that, I had a discussion with my cousin, and I was saying that sometimes when it's going into the 4th, 5th, 6th generation of people, do you keep that within the clan, or is that not of our custom?
I understand, and that's a good question.
Okay.
So, for example, in the Akan tradition, there are 7 Musiakuo, or great master clans, 7 great ancestresses, and governed by actually 7 female abosom, and we talk about that in one of our publications. There are 7 great ancestresses that are the heads of the 7 great master clans. Every Akan person can trace their blood descent to one of those 7 great mothers. If they can't trace their blood descent to one of those 7 great mothers, then they're not Akan. So, and those 7 great mothers are governed by the 7 abosom called, in ancient Kemet, the 7 Het Heru, the 7 Cheche, and Akan, and so forth. So, those 7 great mothers govern the 7 clans. So there are about 20 million Akanfo on the continent between Ghana and Ivory Coast. All 20 million fit in one of those 7 clans. So there may be 10 million that are part of the Asona Abusia, or maybe 4 or 5 million part of the Asona Abusia, 2 or 3 million part of the Agona Abusia, Agona clan, and 4 million part of the Adriana clan, or something like that. But everybody fits within those 7. Those 7 major clans are exogamous clans, meaning that we do not marry within the clan. So even if there are 4 or 5 million people in the Asona Abusia, for example, the Asona clan, you don't marry somebody from the same Asona clan, because that would be considered incest, because that's your brother or sister. You share that same energy. So you must marry somebody outside of one of the other 6 clans. So yes, that notion of incest goes beyond just, of course it exists as far as a taboo just in general with inter-family incest and all of that, but even in the larger ancestral clans where people are, widely dispersed over hundreds of years. You can have somebody part of the Asona Abusia, the Asona clan living in one region of Ghana, been separate from, Asona people hundreds of miles away by 3, 4, or 5, or 6, or even 800 years. But they're still Asona over there. We are Asona over here, and you would not marry somebody within that clan because of the energy complex. Now, so and that's true in different groups as well. There are the rules of what it constitutes incest. Of course, it's always on the closest level. Of course, that's always insane. Siblings and parents and all that other nonsense the wife and offspring love to engage in. That's always been perverse. But then even going further with larger clans, everybody has those rules as well, and they, according to their culture. Now, with regard to, you talked about guidance from elders and elderesses, and of course, just like here, you have your grandmothers, grandfathers, great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers, great-aunts, great-uncles, and so forth, the ones who are honorable elders and elderesses in the clan. Those are the ones who give the best advice, and they are honored for doing that. The ones who are the most intelligent, consistent, moral, and so forth, those are the ones who are looked to when questions need to be answered. And that's always been true in our culture for over a million years, so millions of years. But then the second layer of that direction comes from the Nananum Nsamako, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. In fact, the Nananum Mpanyefo, the elders and eldresses, in one regard represent the honored ancestresses and ancestors on earth. And we talked about that when we were talking about the Abines, the nature of government in our ancestral culture. So we have those two layers. We have the honored elders and eldresses who give that sacred guidance, that wise guidance. But then the second layer is the Nananum Nsamako, who inform the elders and eldresses with regard to that sacred divine guidance. Here in the Western Hemisphere, because many of our people have been infected by the wife and offspring, it's false culture like Christianity and Islam and worshiping a fictional cartoon character, Jesus or Muhammad, or other characters who actually never existed in any form of any race whatsoever, which of course we prove that in our book, Cuckoo to Entomb the Ancestral Jurisdiction. That first layer very often does not exist in many families. Some people have very immature parents and grandparents who are engaged in drug use and other kinds of criminality and self-destructive behaviors. They cannot look to them. They can't look to their parents. They can't look to their grandparents or their aunts and uncles for any kind of direction because they are engaged in self-destructive activities on a daily basis. So that first layer is missing. However, that layer is typically informed by the Nananum spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors anywhere. So we always have that second layer because everybody has within their blood circle, some people within the blood circle that were spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors who still are, who were spiritually cultivated elders and eldresses when they were here, and they moved into that position when they made their transition to the spirit realm. In fact, we have some that are assigned to us pre-incarnation, just like we have our bosom who are assigned to us that govern our head and govern our patriclan and matriclan when we come into the world. That is our personal little ahinata or triangle. We also have certain Nananum Nsamanfo, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct clan that are assigned to us to guide us throughout the course of our lives, assigned to us by Nyamewa, Nyame, or Aminet, Amin, the Supreme Being, pre-incarnation. So we come into the world with our bosom that empower us. We come into the world with certain Nsamanfo that are assigned to give us guidance when we need that guidance. So even if we don't have the first layer, the physical elders and eldresses who have that sacred character manifest on a consistent basis, we always have that second layer. So that means we have to be a little bit more spiritual. That means we have, instead of being able to sit down and just talk to our elders and eldresses and get that information immediately, we sit down with our spiritual elders and eldresses, which are our ancestresses and ancestors, to get that same information. They would have been informing the elders and elders, but now we have to go through accelerated growth in that regard. Just like somebody, there's a family living in a house, and then the father dies. So the youngest or the oldest son, his growth has to accelerate to a certain extent, and now he becomes the man of the house to a certain extent, protecting his younger brothers and sisters and trying to make sure he can do whatever he can to support the household in the absence of the father. He has to become mature a little bit quicker. And in the same fashion, because we have that missing layer of physical elders and eldresses, we have to mature a little bit quicker. Yeah, instead of them in the Nananoman Samako, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors informing that physical layer of elders and eldresses, we have to step into that space and they inform us, and we have to align with that divine order so that we can reestablish culture within our clans, within our blood circles, and perpetuate that as well. So even though we may not have people in our families, we do have people in our families. We just have them in our ancestral families. And that's not a bad thing because we get the culture direct, pure, and uncut, and we can move forward from there.
Okay. Because that explains very, very well for the reason of I see a lot of family members and other people's family members where they might have been in 3-4 marriages, marrying the wrong people. I know a gentleman who said his uncle even married 7 times. Never doing it right. You know what I mean? Like just going by the European ways, and so I guess we have to follow our culture. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Madessa, thank you.
Okay, Yeni Aseda, we appreciate the call.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the final piece we want to touch on, if you look at we want to explain why we utilize certain images for the event notification for the broadcast. So when you look at those images, you'll see we have 4 different images, and this is directly tied to Amannee cultural traditions, customs, traditions, encompassing the wholeness of our functioning as a unique group. So the first image is a quilt from strip weaving quilting in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people culture, our culture here in America. The second piece is actually from our website. This is our symbol for our page on Adebisa, which is divination. We're talking about our Wab, Ojira, Adebisa, our divination practice, our oracular divinatory system given to us within our blood circles from the Abosom, of course, and the Nananom Unsamako right here in our blood circles in Akamo Mind, the Akamo Nation in North America, a part of our practice of Akanfo Nanasom, Akanfo Hoodoo, and so forth. And then we show a symbol. You see the symbol on an iron gate, and then you see the symbol of actually a rabbit's foot. Now, why do we show these 4 symbols? We're talking about cultural continuity here. And the reason we show these symbols, if you look at Akan culture, for example, there are certain things that distinguish Akan culture from other cultures on the continent. One of the first things you may think about is Adinkra symbol. The Adinkra symbols in Akan culture are very popular. You see the Sankofa symbol. You see various other symbols, the J Nyame Wa Nyame symbol, that are very popular and people recognize, those are the Akan Adinkra symbols. The Adinkra symbols are, in reality, they are geometric forms given to us by the Abosom, by Bre, Chirihunuate, and Aberiwa, which is Tehusi and Sesha. In the Akan tradition, these are Abosom of divine wisdom and so forth, just as they gave us many of these same symbols you find in the Medusa ancient Kemet. You find in the Tifinagh script amongst the Tuareg people, because we are the same people migrating from ancient Kemet and Kanat through North Afuraitkai, through the so-called ancient Black Berber nation. That's why we call ourselves Ebibri, folk, the group of people, folk who are Ebibri, is where that comes from. So you'll find these symbols, and they're very popular. They are matrices of energy, just like the Medutu, and some of them are Medutu, matrices of energy, geometric forms that carry a certain energetic capacity. They are magnets for the Abosom, magnets for the Nananom and Sumampo. They are shrines in miniature for the Abosom and Sumampo. They are used on shrines, used ritually on talismans and everything else, clothing and so forth. But they are also used in a, ornamental fashion as well. So Adinkra symbols are utilized similar to Veves and Vodun, to call the spirits down and so forth. So that's one of the distinguishing characteristics of our Khan culture. When we look at continuity, cultural continuity, we show this image of this iron gate with the Sankofa Adinkra symbol. This is an iron gate in America. If you look all throughout, for example, when we first moved to Washington, D.C. a few years back, we noticed that iron gates and doors and everything else, you will find Adinkra symbols all over the city. And we recognized, okay, there must have been Akan people in this region who were enslaved, who are utilizing these Adinkra symbols in their iron work. And they don't, not just the Sankofa symbol, but many of the Adinkra symbols. Then we found out through research that when you look in Louisiana and all across the South and Southeastern United States and even up into New York, wherever people were enslaved, going back to the early so-called 1800s and so forth, late 1700s, early 1800s, you will find in the iron works of the people who were forced to, through enslavement, to engage in these iron works, and we had these skills when we came over here. This is why some of our people were enslaved, because of the engineering capacities that we had, knowledge and everything else, as well as agricultural science and medicinal knowledge. Our people have been weaving these Adinkra symbols into these iron works for centuries since we've been here. So the whites and their offspring and other people who didn't know anything about the culture, growing up in this society, they would just see these symbols on the gates and they'll just say, oh, that's just a nice little pattern. And as soon as our Khan person walks up and sees these symbols, we can identify the symbol. We know what the name of the symbol is, what the Ebe, the proverb associated with it is, and everything else, and how it's used ritually very often. This is cultural continuity. So when our Afuraitkaitnit people in America are instinctively drawn when we see these Adinkra symbols, it's not because we're just, hey, I want to imitate somebody in Ghana to pretend like I'm African. We continued using Adinkra symbols in America for hundreds of years, including ritually, in the form through the practice of hoodoo and so forth. When we look at divinatory practice, we utilize Odwira, which is a term for shells, seashells and so forth. They're often in America called cockle shells and so forth. The Nananom and Sumampo, the Abosom, will direct us to utilize what we have right here in America. And we utilize these shells, for example, the Odwira, the seashells, in our divinatory practice in Oman, the Afuraitkaitnut Nation in North America. After having had this system for well over a decade, we find out later that Akan people use the same kinds of seashells in divinatory practices and ritual practices. We would also find out later that in ancient Kemet, these same kinds of seashells were used in ritual practice. So it was a cultural continuity. The Abosom gave us this system first, had the system for well over a decade, into the 15th and 16th year. Then we find out that this is what is used in Akan culture in contemporary West Afuraitkaitnut, and then we find the same evidence going back to ancient Kanat, Nubian Kemet. Cultural continuity. Then we also show this quilt, and of course African-American quote-unquote quilting, strip weaving, and so forth, very prolific. But when you look at the roots, when you look at this quilt, for example, what you're looking at is a representation of another distinguishing feature of Akan culture. Akan culture, you'll find that kente cloth is a distinguishing feature. Kente, one of the titles for kinten is basket, like a woven basket. So the kente cloth is like a woven basket cloth because of the patterns and the way they're structured. Every different color in the kente cloth pattern carries a specific energy, associated, like yellow associated with the sun and the fiery energy of the sun, red dealing with the kind of Bena and the fire energy of the Abosom associated with that. Every color connects to forces in nature, every pattern has a specific reference as well to divine living energy. Every kente cloth pattern has one or more ebe or proverbs, divine wisdom teachings associated with that pattern. And every pattern has its own sacred name. So it's not just a design. Some people can see a kente cloth designs, maybe the green and yellow and red, or the orange and black and yellow, or the blue and yellow and red, or the blue and yellow and gold, and they'll see these different patterns and say, oh, these are just different patterns. But actually, each pattern has its own sacred name. It has a ebe or proverb associated with it, and the colors and the geometric forms all carry divine energy. So we can define them. It's a script. It's actually speaking. Literally, the cloth speaks. Divine living energy emanating from each different color resonates with certain frequencies, certain sound vibrations, with geometric patterns generate certain sound vibrations. So the collection of the colors and the geometric forms generate a collection of sound vibrations that are unique to that pattern. So the cloth is literally speaking. And we can attune to the energy emanating from these colors and forms and align ourselves with it. So that's why they're used in sacred ceremonies as well. The strip weaving that you see amongst Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in America, one of the expressions of that, for example, this quilt that we show, you'll see that Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, we have grandmothers and others in the family that were prolific quilt makers because they didn't have the same kind of loom that we had on the continent, where we can take those strips and weave them together in the traditional form of kente cloth. We simply took strips of the kind of cloth that we could acquire over here and replicated similar patterns. So we were replicating and recreating kente cloth right here in America. We were replicating, of course, the Adinkra symbols and continue using them right here in America. We're utilizing our divinatory practices, the seashells and so forth, right here in America, communicating with the same abosom, the same nanano and samapa. Of course, we show the rabbit's foot is something that is utilized in hoodoo and utilized in other traditions. You'll find that throughout North America amongst Afuraitkaitnit people. Of course, that is a carryover from ritual practices from the continent, talismans and so forth, associated with ancestral energy as well as the energy of the abosom, animal spirits and so forth that we incorporate in our ritual practice. So we show these things together to show that cultural continuity. We're not about imitating contemporary people on the continent. We are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the West. And we have our own culture. We are ODWIRAMAN. We are the purified Odwira Oman nation in the West, Oman. We have our own culture, our own collective identity as a subset of the world Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit body. We must respect our Amannee, our customs, our traditions, because they are rooted in divine order. They are rooted in our spirit genetic makeup as we have interfaced with this region of Asase Afua and forged a unique culture based on that interfacing and based on our divine function individually and collectively. So this is why we utilize these symbols. All right, so we're going to go through the chat room right quick to make sure we didn't miss any questions or comments. And we saw a few comments here, so we just want to scroll through them quickly. And just give us a second. Okay, yes. And we are going to get that Afuraitkaitnit Womanhood book out as soon as possible. Okay, and as we're going through that, we have another call on the phone line. Okay, Michiawo on the phone line, number 4197. You had a question or a comment?
Yes, Michiawo, this is Amma.
Mijay, what's up? How you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
Good.
Okay. I just had a comment when you mentioned the Adinkra symbols on the iron, you know, in the houses or outside the houses and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, we've noticed them here also. Like, you know, we will see like the Sankofa symbol, you know, the not the bird version, but the other one, with like it looks like
right.
a heart. Yeah, so you know, can you repeat that?
Say it again.
No, I had thought you said something, but I was just, you know, I like how you highlighted that just now because we noticed that here also. So, but I say for that.
Oh, Yeni Aseda, we appreciate that confirmation.
Yeah.
And just as just as it's true, of course, in North America, and the sister was calling from Connecticut, but then there's a large Jamaican population in Connecticut, but it's true also in Jamaica, of course. So you'll find, you know, those symbols showing up as well. You'll find the different strip weaving in Jamaica as well, just like you'll find for example, the Anansi stories in Jamaica, the spider stories and so forth, coming from the Anansi stem, the Anansi stories in the Akan tradition. And then when you get into North America and you get into hoodoo and so forth, you'll find in hoodoo that we do not kill spiders, and spiders are called Aunt Nancy or Aunt Nancy, and, you know, there are Aunt Nancy stories. And, of course, that's Anansi stories maintained in North America. So it's still the Akan culture still perpetuated. And the same as with Yoruba culture, Igbo, Bakongo, and various others. You'll find these various expressions, for example, the bottle trees that you see in hoodoo and so forth, coming from the Congo. Same thing that we utilize here amongst Gullah Geechee people and so forth, and in other areas. You'll find that we maintain these cultural practices. All right, so just want to scroll through here quickly. And there are a few minutes left in the broadcast, about 7 minutes left in the broadcast, and as we scroll through this, the chat room, we have sent out some information for those who are new to some of the broadcasts or may not be on the list. Just this past FIDA, this past Friday, launched an initiative, the Obedima Afurakani Manhood Training Initiative. We were just reading from the Obedima Afurakani Manhood book. We published the book in 13,008, Gregorian calendar 2008, and we published the book based on our experience of teaching these workshops based on these 7 principal values of manhood. We were teaching them before we published the book, years in advance, and then we published the book, released the softcover version and the ebook version. The ebook version of the book is a free download. It's on our website. It's been there for a number of years, so we've had thousands of people download the Obedima Afurakani Manhood book in this country and around the world. One reading of the book transformed the lives of our people, transformed the focus of our young as well as adult men, refining their character, refining their focus, refining their drive to realign their thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order and functioning as Afurakani men and transforming their relationships with their wives, their quote-unquote girlfriends, their children, their families, entrepreneurially and so forth, overcoming drug addiction and other self-destructive activities, criminal-type activities, and getting back in harmony with order. Just through one reading of the book, we also, not only doing workshops, we've done workshops through the video series so people can download the 2-part video series we did on Ustream, free download, of course, as well as the 2.5-hour broadcast that we did on this Blog Talk Radio channel. They can download those for free, where we went through the entire book, similar to the way that we do in the workshops. So even if brothers do not have any funds, as long as they have a smartphone, they can download the entire book. Then they can download the video series where we go through the entire book. We've clarified every point in the book. Sometimes the information is new, and they can get that information incorporated into their lives. We are moving forward with expanding those. Whenever we've had a workshop, the workshop's always free. We would give away free copies of the softcover version of the book to everybody at the workshop. We also have an entrepreneurship opportunity for Afurakani men as well as Afurakani women. If they would like to begin to work immediately, they can become distributors of our softcover books. We have published 16 books to date, including Obedima Afurakani Manhood. When you go to the Unhoma page, the publications page, you can get that information, the document dealing with the distributor information, as well as a short video talking about that process. So we have an option so people can not only form themselves into Afurakani men, but also have an entrepreneurial option so they can become self-employed immediately, so they can turn to our culture and employ themselves. We want to expand these services. And another beneficial thing that has taken place, and offshoot of that, is people taking this information, people who are social workers and therapists and case managers and work in human services, and they have begun to do workshops based on ODWIRAMAN, transforming the young men and older men in their areas as well. And that's a great development as well. We want to expand these workshops, expand the process of giving the softcover versions out for free to every Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit man in America, young and old, inclusive of the ebook version, which is already free, but we want to give out these free books. But we also want to expand the entrepreneurship piece. Some people don't have the funds to purchase the books wholesale up front so they can begin to sell them retail. We don't always have the funds to be able to print out like 1,000+ books and spread them out to a number of people and then wait for them to sell them and get the money back so we can begin to print out more books. We don't have the funds to do that on that scale yet. We would like to be able to do that, but your contribution to our GoFundMe campaign for ODWIRAMAN will assist us in expanding that entrepreneurship program for young Afurakani men, as well as the free workshops in different cities, as well as the passing out of the free softcover versions of the book. Every Afurakani young male, your son, nephew, as well as older male, needs to have this book in their possession. The ebook is already free, as we said. We would like to get the softcover version out. For those who would like to listen beyond 11 o'clock, you have about a minute to call in, because just online it will cut off, but you have to call in if you want to listen beyond 11 o'clock. The call-in number is 657-383-0635. 657-383-0635. You have about 45 seconds to call in. 657-383-0635. But we won't go too much further beyond 11. So, and we also have people who have ordered the books, not only here, but also in other countries as well. Of course, have downloaded them. Some have ordered the physical copies as well. So it's reaching out to Afurakani men all around the world. So we want to expand that service so we can reach every Afurakani male. You know, they give out free Bibles and Qurans to black people all the time, brainwashing our people. We like to give out free copies of our softcover books, especially this one, to every Afurakani male in the country as well as around the world. So your contribution to our GoFundMe campaign, see that on the website, will assist us. Go to the ODWIRAMAN page on the website and you'll see that, as well as the Nhoma page, the publications page. Of course, we have published 16 books to date. You can go to the Nhoma page and make a purchase of those as well. They range between $8 and $11. Any order of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. So, for example, when people order the entire 16-book set, the price breaks down after the discount to just about around $7 per book. And many people have ordered the entire 16-book set, like a set of encyclopedias. Any donation to our GoFundMe campaign for ODWIRAMAN, the Afurakani Manhood Training Initiative, any donation of $15 or more will allow you to receive one or more of our softcover books, whichever one you would like. So just let us know which ones you would like. So this way, it's not just a donation. You're receiving an immediate benefit because you're receiving books in return for your donation, just like a purchase, a regular purchase. But at the same time, you know that you're assisting in the expansion of this training initiative. We're reaching Afurakani men, young men and adults right where they are right now. We do not have to wait for institutions to be built. We don't have to wait for anything. We can reach them right where they are. If they're in the worst socioeconomic condition imaginable, once they get that book in their hand, they transform their mind. They start making different decisions to get themselves out of that situation, inclusive of that entrepreneurial endeavor. We can reach them immediately just by getting the information into their hands. We don't have to wait for programs, institutions, leaders, and so forth. We can reach them right where they are right now. We've been doing this for over 7 years in Chicago as well as D.C., and now that, the information on the internet for free, of course, has been for free for a number of years. It's reached across the world. So we'd like to expand that process. And yet I say we thank you, the individuals who have contributed, made donations to the ODWIRAMAN Afurakani Manhood Training Initiative GoFundMe campaign, and for those who have purchased books, because any purchase of our books is always supporting these efforts. This effort, as well as the effort for our Akongwasuya Dine, our institution of learning, healing, training, employment, and entrepreneurship that we are establishing here in D.C., and we're working to acquire a space for that institution. Of course, the institution is already up and running, but we would like a physical space so we could expand our class offerings, expand our activities, as well as employment opportunities in the publishing arm of the organization, because we print our own books in-house on our own printers, so therefore we can expand that printing operation and have employment opportunities right there in the center, as well as expanding our class offerings, including the broadcast, but in addition to that, having classes in the center, as well as people attending classes via live stream. And that also can develop into entrepreneurial endeavors as well. When people go through the Batasa System workshop, for example, or go through the ODWIRAMAN workshop, for example, if they are working with at-risk youth, or they're case managers or independent contractors, they work in behavioral health and so forth, those who need people to work with quote-unquote at-risk youth, or need people to work with the quote-unquote African-American population in behavioral health, and they need somebody who has experience working with people, who can, are effective with working with people. We have these trainings, for example, the Sankofa Juma training, where we show caseworkers, social workers, therapists how to incorporate culture in their therapeutic interventions with their clients. Our Nkwamua Whole Life Journal is a manual for that. We have our Afura Whole Life Intervention therapeutic model, where we do that and so forth, so you can utilize that information and you have an expertise in working with this quote-unquote at-risk population, whereas the other social workers, they haven't been able to do so, and therefore these agencies are looking for people who have the desire to work with these populations, because many of these social workers and others, they want to wash their hands with these populations. But when you have an effective means to deal with them and transform them, and they see that it's effective, they will bring you in, and that becomes an entrepreneurial endeavor as well. So all of that is connected to the work that we are doing. So anytime you make a purchase or make a donation to, the organization, you are supporting these various endeavors. And yet I'll say to those who have made those donations and supported the work that we're doing. All right, so I don't think there were any other questions in the chat room. I think these were just comments from what I understand. Okay, I think that was it. All right, so again, Yeda say we thank you for tuning in. Please share the information. We are Odwira on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube so you'll get all the updates. Subscribe to us on Twitter as Odwira, Instagram as Odwira, Kwesiakan or Odwira or Afuraitkaitnut on Facebook. We also have an Akanfo Nanason group on Facebook you can join. Also, we have our own separate social media network, Afuraitkaitnut.ning.com, Ning.com. Therefore, it's similar to Facebook, but it's our own private network that we pay for, so we can have something outside of these other networks when they shut down pages and decide that you're too Afrocentric and they want to shut your pages down and so forth. We have our own independent network for that, so you can join the network, create a profile, and we post blogs and discussions, and people interact from different parts of the country and the world who are studying the same information and end up linking up and learning about groups and activities in different areas and so forth. And finally, we have established our Feku process, the Nanason Feku Ancestral Religion Study Groups. You can start a Feku, an Ancestral Religious Study Group, in your area with one or more people, either online, in person, or a combination thereof. Of course, you don't have to be an expert. You all are learning together. We have a recommended curriculum on our Feku page on the website, starting with the Kuku Tuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction, Anyone who is part of a EGUA, an ancestral religion study group, or there's 2 of you or more, when you go to the FECU page, you can order our books for an automatic 30% discount because you are part of an ancestral religion study group. So we've had a number of groups form in different states so far, and people are beginning to establish these groups as well. So check that out on the website also. So again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in. Please check out the entire ODWIRAMAN 7-part series. We will be uploading this one. It'll be ready by tomorrow morning to upload. It'll be ready within about a half an hour on Blog Talk Radio, the channel. And you can follow us on this channel, but we will upload it to YouTube as well, and that'll be by tomorrow morning. So you can share that 7-part series with your contacts, because our people, of course, need to know that wherever we are in the Western Hemisphere, we are ODWIRAMAN, we are the Purified Nation, the Purified Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in the West. We're talking about Pan-Africanism from a real, authentic, ancestral religious perspective, grounded in reality. So, again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebeshia Bio, we will meet again. That's that.